Beyond the gates, spoilers tease that the Dupree-Richardson estate will never be the same once the night of revelations arrives. And even those who think they understand the hidden corridors of power within the grand mansion may soon find themselves gasping at secrets buried far deeper than any of them imagined. From the moment Eva Dupree-Richardson first caught a glimpse of her mother's inscrutable smile as she smoothed a glass of champagne in the library, she sensed that something more sinister than mere family politicking was underway. It began as a whisper of doubt, a small tremor in her convictions. Why did her mother, Marisol, insist that Eva oversee certain documents in the weeks leading up to the will-reading ceremony? Why had Marisol grown so protective of the study where the family archive lay, locking it at odd hours? And why did Leslie, her devoted aunt, hover around Eva as though guarding a fragile secret, only to vanish into the shadows whenever Eva attempted to confront her? These early seeds of suspicion would grow into a suffocating vine of dread, leading up to a disappearance that would shock the entire Dupree-Richardson clan and unveil a web of deceit that threatened to shatter every bond of trust. Eva's journey into suspicion began innocuously enough, a misplaced ledger here, a cryptic conversation there. She would often find her mother standing over the mahogany desk in the study, scrolling through financial spreadsheets that seemed to reference charity funds in numbers that didn't add up. Whenever Eva asked a question, Marisol would merely wave her off, remarking that such details were best left to adults with the proper clearance. But as Eva delved deeper, flipping through old account books, cross-referencing dates of expenditures, and tracking donations, she realized that she was inching toward a truth so volatile that it might destroy the very foundation of the Dupree-Richardson legacy. Late one night, she discovered an entry in her personal diary, hastily scrawled in indigo ink. "They're taking more than they claim. There's something rotten in these numbers." That vague but ominous note would become the key to the entire mystery, though Eva did not yet grasp its full weight. Marisol, noticing her daughter's furtive glances and whispered confessions to a closed journal, decided to accelerate her mother-daughter lessons in loyalty. Under the guise of grooming Eva for a life of philanthropy, continuing the Dupree-Richardson tradition of charitable giving, she began to involve her daughter in increasingly clandestine tasks, shredding old bank statements, supervising the transfer of large sums to anonymous accounts, and even coaching Eva on how to deflect probing questions from curious relatives. At first, Eva complied, driven by a desire to please her mother and maintain her place in the inner sanctum of the family's power. Yet, as the nights wore on and the candle flames flickered against the opulent wallpaper, she felt her conscience grow heavier. Each shredded page seemed to shred her innocence a little more, and with every transaction she witnessed, the unspoken realization took root that her mother was orchestrating something far darker than a simple embezzlement. The question was, how far would Marisol go to protect her schemes, and how deeply could Eva trust those she once believed loyal? The night before the will-reading gala, the Dupree-Richardson estate hummed with anticipation. The grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, and guests in designer gowns drifted through the corridors, unaware of the storm about to break. Eva, dressed in a midnight blue silk dress that clung to her slender frame, felt a knot in her stomach as she glanced at her reflection in the ornate gilded mirror. Her eyes, once bright with youthful optimism, now bore shadows of skepticism. She knew that tonight would be different. Tonight, she would refuse to play along with her mother's charade. With trembling hands, she pocketed the pages from her diary that held cryptic clues about the charity fund discrepancies, evidence that might topple Marisol's carefully cultivated empire. She resolved to confront her mother in the study one last time, to demand answers and, if necessary, expose the truth in front of the assembled family. But as midnight approached and the grandfather clock began its slow, sonorous toll, Eva realized that Marisol had already anticipated her rebellion. Before she could step into the study, the door swung shut with a deafening click, and Marisol's voice crackled through the oak frame. "Not tonight, my dear. Rest now." Tomorrow will be brighter. That would be the last time anyone would see Eva Dupree Richardson walking the luster of the halls under her own power. When Eva failed to appear among the guests for the will reading that evening, a hush fell over the room. The grand doors to the library opened, and Marisol stood there, her face a mask of porcelain calm. Leslie, who had always seemed to traverse the fine line between devotion and subservience to Marisol, moved to her sister's side, offering a silent, sympathetic nod to the assembled relatives. "Eva is indisposed," Marisol announced in a voice that trembled almost imperceptibly at the edges. "She cannot join us tonight." Gasps rippled through the crowd, cousins exchanged worried glances, and the lawyers harumphed as they shuffled their documents. The will, it seemed, would have to be read without the heir apparent present. But beneath those glances lay more than mere surprise. Suspicion bloomed like a dark flower. After all, there had been whispers of conflict between Eva and Marisol in the past weeks, and rumors of financial misconduct at the head of the household. Could it be that Eva, in a final act of defiance, had run away or worse, been silenced to protect the secrets her diary had threatened to expose? Initially, all eyes slid toward Leslie, the aunt who had always seemed too eager to curry favor with Marisol, yet who was rumored to nurse quiet ambitions of her own. Leslie had been seen lingering near the study late that afternoon, her figure outlined by the flicker of lamplight as she slid inside, only to emerge a few minutes later clutching the very ledger that Eva had been scrutinizing. When questioned, Leslie claimed she was simply retrieving misplaced documents, but her evasive manner and sudden exit from the library minutes before Eva's disappearance fueled gossip. Some whispered that Leslie, acting under Marisol's orders, had orchestrated the abduction to ensure that Eva could not thwart the will reading or unearth the truth about the charity funds. Others speculated that Leslie, resentful of Eva's status as the beloved daughter and presumed heir, had seized the opportunity to remove a rival. Yet despite the mounting accusations, there was an uneasy sense that the truth lay elsewhere in the hushed tone with which Marisol spoke to her legal counsel, in the anxious glances exchanged between Marisol and Leslie as they took the lectern, and in the way the servants hurried about, their faces drawn and terrified, as though privy to a dangerous conspiracy. No one knew how deep the treachery ran, or who was pulling the strings from behind the ornate wood paneling. As the law enforcement sweep of the mansion began, a more unsettling possibility emerged. Someone within the family, another silent architect, had orchestrated Eva's disappearance to protect a far more insidious agenda. The diary she left behind offered tantalizing clues, a list of names scratched in haste, tangled webs of ledgers indicating unauthorized wire transfers, and a cryptic reference to the shadow self in room 312. Rumor had it that room 312 was once a hidden study for the family's most private dealings, sealed off years ago by the founder himself to protect scandalous secrets. Could Eva's final entries point to someone who wielded influence deeper than even Marisol or Leslie? The tense atmosphere grew thicker as relatives began to question one another. Uncle Warren's alibi seemed shaky. Why had he been absent from the gala? Cousin Donald, who oversaw the family's media investments, had been unusually quiet, and his name appeared in the diary underlined twice. Even Lily, the youngest cousin seemingly too naive to harbor such duplicity, had been spotted rifling through Marisol's files earlier that day. The sense of dread mounted. The enemy might be someone they all loved, someone whose betrayal could cut deeper than any outsider's malice. In the days that followed, a formal investigation ignited a frenzy of scrutiny. Detectives combed through the estate from the battered wine cellar to the silent chapel where the Dupree Richardsons worshipped. They discovered faint footprints in the freshly waxed hallway leading to the east wing, where room 312 remained hidden behind a false wall exactly as Eva had described in her diary. It was there, amidst dust-lined tomes and faded family portraits, that the first real breakthrough occurred, a stack of financial records detailing unauthorized withdrawals from the Hope's Reach Fund, The Dupree Richardson charity established decades prior to aid disadvantaged children. The sums were staggering, siphoned away to offshore accounts under code names, cleverly disguised as legitimate philanthropic expenses. But most shocking of all was the signature adorning each forged transaction, a stylized monogram that matched the seal on Aunt Leslie's stationery. It seemed at first glance to confirm the family's darkest suspicions, yet investigators noted that the signature was too perfect, almost ornamental, too elegant for Leslie's usual scrawl. Could someone have been framing her to divert attention from the true culprit? The more they uncovered, the murkier the truth became. Meanwhile, Marisol maintained a serene facade, hosting press conferences in which she extolled her daughter's virtues and called for calm, her voice steady and unwavering as she pledged to cooperate fully with the investigation. But behind closed doors, she was a woman unraveling. In the solitude of her private quarters, she pored over ledgers and photographs, her gaze haunted. The prospects of losing her empire, her reputation, her very identity in the eyes of society and her family loomed large. Yet for all her fear, there remained a glimmer of defiance in her eyes. She would not let her carefully constructed world collapse without a fight. Each night, she retreated to the locked study to speak in hushed tones to someone only she could hear, someone whose dark laughter echoed through the halls. Their alliance, forged in secrecy, had produced results neither of them could have anticipated. But now the tide seemed to be turning, and Marisol's once impervious shield was showing cracks. Whether it was a betrayal born of greed, jealousy, or the relentless pursuit of power, the identity of the hidden puppet master eluded even the most seasoned detectives. The discoveries in room 312 pointed away from Leslie, as anomalies in handwriting analysis suggested the monogram was likely a forgery perfected by an expert, someone with intimate knowledge of the family's symbols and codes. The investigators turned their attention to the possibility that Marisol herself had enlisted the help of a financial consultant or shadowy advisor to orchestrate the embezzlement. Yet when they questioned the consultants, they learned that the funds had been redirected through multiple intermediary accounts, each more labyrinthine than the last, and that the trail, though extensive, had reached a financial ghost that no one could trace. At the same time, it became clear that Eva's diary entries were more than a mere record of financial wrongdoing. They hinted at an even darker plot, plans to sabotage the family's legacy, to destroy Hope's Reach, and to redirect the charity's influence toward a purpose that threatened the very soul of the Dupree Richardson name. Who could harbor such hatred? Who among them was capable of mutilating not only the family's fortune, but also its goodwill in the world? As days turned into weeks, the estate became a theater of suspicion. Family gatherings, once lavish affairs of silk and laughter, devolved into tense interrogations and whispered accusations. Cousins who used to flirt with each other over champagne turned cold, their glances wary and mistrustful. The servants, too, exchanged rumors. Did they hear Marisol arguing with an unknown visitor in the dead of night? Did they see Leslie slipping out through the servants' quarters, head bowed as though burdened by guilt? Or was the true villain someone who wore the mantle of innocence, concealing hatred behind a mask of familial devotion? In the midst of this chaos, Eva's absence echoed like a void, a reminder that no one was safe, not even those who believed themselves most protected by blood ties. But even as the net of suspicion tightened, there remained hope that Eva, ever resourceful, had left further clues buried within her diary, waiting to be unearthed by the one confidant who truly believed in her, her longtime friend, Jonathan Clark. Jonathan, a former private investigator who had become attached to the Dupree Richardson family through his work with their security detail, refused to believe that Eva had been silenced before she could speak the truth. He had spent countless nights hunched over her scribbled notes, deciphering codes and tracing the names she had underlined. He had pored over archives of charity records alongside Eva, taught her how to spot discrepancies and follow the paper trail. When she disappeared, he felt an ache as though a part of himself had vanished. Yet he also felt a fierce determination to finish what she had started, to bring her captor to justice, and to restore her voice to the halls of the mansion. With the permission of the detective reluctantly granted, given his intimacy with the family, Jonathan embarked on his own subterranean investigation, navigating the opulent but perilous maze of secrets that the Dupree Richardsons had built over generations. Jonathan's first breakthrough came when he re-examined the financial ledgers, noticing a series of small but deliberate discrepancies. The withdrawal dates all corresponded to nights when Marisol hosted private dinner parties. Yet none of those guests were ever mentioned as beneficiaries of the charity. His suspicions turned to the guest list, which included not only family members, but also several outside advisors, lawyers, accountants, and business associates whose names he didn't recognize. Digging deeper, he discovered that one of these advisors was not a remote bureaucrat at all, but rather a distant cousin named Geraldine Beaumont, a woman thought to be estranged from the family for decades. Geraldine had vanished from public view after a bitter inheritance dispute years ago, and her name had not surfaced in any official capacity since. But somehow, her signature, distinctive, angular, and cold, had appeared on documents authorizing transfers out of Hope's reach. When Jonathan confronted Marisol with the information, her face twisted in anger and shame. She denied knowing where Geraldine was, though her trembling hands betrayed the lie. It seemed that Geraldine had returned to exact revenge, using Marisol's greed as a pawn in a larger game to dismantle the Dupree Richardson dynasty from within. While Jonathan continued to peel back the layers, the detectives uncovered surveillance footage from a hidden camera in the study planted years ago by the paranoid patriarch, Arthur Dupree Richardson, long before his death. The camera, now dust-covered and tucked behind a painting, had captured the silhouette of a person slipping into the study on the night Eva vanished. The figure moved with grace and confidence, indicating familiarity with the estate's secret passages. Jonathan recognized the gait instantly. It was Geraldine. The footage showed her conversing briefly with Marisol, in exchange too muffled to hear for the technicians, but enough to confirm that Marisol had known Geraldine was back. Moments later, Geraldine was seen escorting Eva out of the study, Eva's arms bound with silk ties that matched the color of the charity's signature ribbon. The image, though grainy, left little doubt. Eva's abduction was not a freak incident, but a calculated maneuver in Geraldine's campaign to destabilize the family. The question now was, why leave the diary behind, allowing Eva's final crumbs of evidence to lead Jonathan to the truth? Perhaps Geraldine believed that Marisol would break under pressure and protect her from detection. Or perhaps she sought to toy with the family's emotions, letting them know exactly how far she was willing to go. As Jonathan digested this revelation, he felt a twinge of dread for Eva. The last humane flicker he saw in her diary indicated not only that she had uncovered the embezzlement, but also that she suspected a deeper conspiracy, an illicit plan to drain the family's fortune, liquidate assets, and then vanish, leaving the Dupree Richardsons bankrupt and disgraced. Geraldine's return was more than revenge. It was a takeover, a hostile siege that threatened to expose every hidden sin, every betrayal sacrificed on the altar of generational wealth. Jonathan steeled himself, knowing that he would have to navigate the labyrinth alone, marrying the precise skills of a detective with the intimate knowledge of the family's history that he had gleaned from Eva. He scoured the estate for any trace of a secret hideaway where Geraldine might hold Eva captive. His search led him to the mansion's forgotten underground wing, sealed off after the Great Fire that claimed the life of Arthur's first wife. The tunnels were cold and damp, lined with crumbling brick and flickering sconces that had not been lit in decades. As he descended, the echoes of his footsteps seemed to beckon him toward a hidden chamber, where the air turned rancid with stagnation and fear. Inside that chamber, in the flicker of his flashlight, Jonathan glimpsed Eva, her hair tangled, her clothes torn, yet her eyes blazing with defiance. She looked at him as though she had been waiting for him to arrive, relief mingling with anger. "I knew you'd come," she whispered, reaching out a trembling hand. He quickly untied her bonds, noticing the faint bruises on her wrists and the hunger in her gaze. "It's not over," she gasped, her voice barely audible. "Geraldine has more in store. She's already started liquidating assets. If we don't stop her, everything will be gone." Jonathan nodded, adrenaline surging through his veins as he helped her to her feet. Together, they navigated the maze of tunnels back to the main house, forging a plan to confront Geraldine and Marisol in a final, decisive standoff. Meanwhile, above them, the Dupree Richardson family gathered in the grand parlor, unaware that their matriarch Marisol had been informed of Geraldine's capture of Eva. Marisol believed that unveiling Geraldine's crime at that very moment would secure her own redemption, washing away the guilt of her complicity in the embezzlement. She had arranged for a hasty family meeting, expecting to triumph with evidence that would vilify Geraldine while sparing herself any wrath. The heavy drapes were drawn, and the fireplace crackled as relatives assembled, Uncle Warren's pained expression, Aunt Leslie's forced composure, Cousin Donald's smug confidence that the worst was over. None suspected that Eva, bruised but emboldened, was about to walk through the door. When she appeared, supported by Jonathan, gasps echoed like thunder. Marisol's face went from triumph to stark terror in a heartbeat. Jonathan stepped forward, his voice firm. "Geraldine isn't the only one who betrayed this family. You, Marisol, enabled it. You destroyed Hope's reach with your greed. You colluded with Geraldine to siphon funds, to ruin this family's legacy. But we have proof." He produced the diary, opening it to the page where Eva had detailed Marisol's secret instructions to delete certain files, instructions that struck directly at Marisol's heart. The room quaked with shock. Some relatives recoiled in disbelief, others erupted into furious demands for answers. Under the weight of her daughter's gaze, Marisol's veneer cracked like porcelain. She tried to speak, but words failed her. Leslie stepped forward, her eyes wide with panic, uncertain whether to salvage her own reputation or stand by her sister. But the truth was a blade that cut through silence. Marisol had known of Geraldine's existence, had welcomed her back in exchange for sharing the spoils. Greta, the eldest cousin, pressed forward, holding a crisp copy of the forged monogram with evidence of Geraldine's handwriting. "This proves it," Greta exclaimed, handing the document to the family lawyer, who confirmed the authenticity. "Marisol, you signed off on these transactions. You did not merely follow Geraldine's lead, you orchestrated it." In the aftermath, the Dupree Richardson family lay shattered. Geraldine was taken into custody, Eva and Jonathan stood in solemn solidarity, and Marisol, once a queen among her kin, was now a pariah. The charity, Hope's Reach, had been drained to a fraction of its former glory, but under Eva's guidance and with Jonathan's support, steps were taken to rebuild, to reclaim the family's philanthropic mission. Though bitter words had been spoken and wounds inflicted, there was, at last, a glimmer of hope that genuine redemption could arise from the ashes of betrayal. Eva, scarred but unbroken, emerged as the new steward of Hope's Reach, vowing to shield it from future exploitation. In the weeks that followed, she pieced together a new legacy, one not built upon the frail pillars of secrecy and deceit, but upon transparency, compassion, and the shared bonds of family. The halls of the Dupree Richardson estate no longer echoed with whispered conspiracies. Instead, they resonated with the determined steps of a young woman who had faced the darkness, uncovered the rot, and emerged victorious. Yet, as she stood before the portrait of her ancestors, she knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges. For in beyond the gates, the most dangerous enemy is often the one who hides behind a familiar face, and the greatest triumph comes not from vanquishing an external threat, but from conquering the shadows within.